Okay, my name is Christopher Kent, Christopher. Last name is Kent, Kent, and I am a founder and partner in a foresight and futures consulting firm here in Washington, D.C. called Foresight Alliance. And what we do is we consult with clients on change, basically, what change is happening, how it's going to play out, and how it's going to affect them, whether it be their sector, whether it be their clients, whether it be sometimes it's just a certain department. So what we do as foresight practitioners and futurists, we help our clients understand change, technological change, social change, environmental change, and how that is going to shape their future in the next 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, and very kind of quickly, how long has foresight, or as the idea of being a futurist, how long has that been like a market or something that people have been using?
Well, Foresight Alliance itself has been around for 10 years. We came from a previous firm where we were all futurists together that was around for a while. I mean, foresight as a practice has probably been around for generally about 50 years. It came out of, maybe actually, that just shows how old I am. It's longer than that. It came out of Rand after World War II. And so that's got to be, what, 60 or 70 years at this point now. But Rand was sort of the progenitor of current foresight thinking and practices and sectors. And then 50 years back in the 70s, it got another big boost as well. And so basically, so post-war, Rand Corporation is how long Foresight and Futures has been around as a practice, the way that it is now.
Give me one quick second. Kind of another question along that vein. What, I guess, like, how do you become a futurist? Like, what do you look at? How do you analyze it? How does that become a job?
Well, there's two answers, or there's probably more than two answers. There's actually a number of schools of foresight studies around. The University of Houston has a foresight program. The University of Hawaii was one of the leaders in foresight. Jim Dator is one of the big names, big founders in foresight practices and futurism. Was the leader of the Foresight School in Hawaii. And there's various other locales around the world. So you can go and get a degree in futures and foresight. And particularly these days, it's being added on to other things. So design has become a big thread in the field of foresight and futures practices. You know, using design and helping to understand what a future is going to look like by being able to say make things that represent potential or possible futures. And in my case, the way I found it is I actually am a historian by training. I have my degree in medieval and Renaissance history. And people always say, you're a medieval historian and now you're a futurist. But what I tell them is all the things that I learned in school, to look at the clues from past civilizations, what they wrote, what they left behind, how they acted, and to do analysis of that to find out who they are and tell their stories, is the same tool set that I use as a futurist. It's just rotated 180 degrees. So now I'm looking at things I'm seeing today, what people are saying, what people are doing, what tools they're using, and helping to understand what their future is going to be. Using those same analytical tools. So, sure. With us, I mean, there's a lot of different people who are futurists, who are futurist consultants, foresight consultants. There are a lot of different niches and such that you can fall into. There are some people who do things like packaging futures. So they work with consumer packaged goods, and all they sort of do is look at, like, what is going to be the future of package and package design, and what are people going to need. There are other people who do, as I said, a lot of people doing design futures. So working with designers, working with companies to do prototypes and product development. Ourselves, my firm are generalists. We have people who have specific interest areas within the firm, but as a firm ourselves, we're generalists. And I say if we focus on anything, we focus on consumer futures. What is shaping the people today, and how are they changing, and what is that going to mean for our clients, as I said, 10, 15 years down the road. And so most of our clients are companies are organizations that sell directly to their B2C. They sell directly to consumers because they have a real interest in what consumers are going to be. And then we also have started in the last 7 or 8 years working with organizations, professional organizations, trade associations and such, to teach them foresight theory and foresight thinking and methodology, so they can start building a culture of foresight within their own organization. So we're helping them in that way. We're doing two things. Again, they have a lot of customers because they're a member-based organization. So we're helping them understand where they're fielded, both as a professional organization, but also in the specific field that they represent. How is that changing? What are their members going to need? But we're also then teaching them how to build a culture of foresight within the organization as well. So they can, so eventually, you know, we can sort of hand it off to them and we can go on and they can run the ship on their own. So.
And another, I guess, in that vein, it's super broad. So however you want to kind of funnel this down, what are you kind of predicting or looking at now based on where we are right now in this pandemic? Is there a general view you're looking at, or if you want to do a general view and then break it down by consumer to innovation to tech, it's up to you. But I was kind of wondering what you were thinking of the future based on what we're seeing right now.
Right. That's a good question. You know, and you use the P word there. You know, as futurists, we never predict, because as we always tell our clients, there is no one singular future. There's a whole range of probable futures. And that's really what our job is when we go in to talk with clients and talk with our customers, is that we're not there to say this will happen on this date. What we are there to do is help them understand what's happening today, to sort of filter out the signal from the noise, so they can start to understand what's going to happen, and then they can prepare for a broad range of futures. To get more to your question, one of the things we're doing right now is not actually talking to our clients about what we think is going to happen, because at this point, there's just, as I said, there's just too much noise and not enough signal. But what we are doing with our clients, because as I said, we're there to help them understand what's going on, is we're starting to develop some rubrics for them to use, because there's a lot of, as you say, there's a lot of people talking about what might happen. You know, what is this all going to mean? Is this the end of this industry? Is this the end of that industry? You know, what is this change going to mean? And so what we are doing right now with our clients is helping them to, we're building for them a tool set, a rubric, some guidance for them. So when they see things, when they see these forecasts that are coming out, they can actually evaluate them in a systematic way. So they can say, oh, this doesn't really make sense because of A, B, and C. And so, you know, some of the things that we're talking to them about then is, you know, when you look at the forecasts that you're seeing, you have to say, like, are they, you know, you ask the questions like, do they run counter to sort of basic human impulses, or are they running counter to maybe like strongly held cultural beliefs? And so, like, the obvious big one there is staying inside. Like, we're not going to stay inside forever. You know, so people who are saying we're going to be staying inside forever, you know, you can write that off, because that's not how people work. Wearing of masks. You know, Americans are not a culture of mask wearers. We've never been, you know, Asian cultures have always been more mask oriented. And so that sort of runs against, wearing of masks runs against sort of a basic cultural belief of the United States, of Americans. And so in the short term, there may be some uptick in, you know, masks and that sort of stuff, but it's not going to be sustainable. So what we're doing is telling them, you know, when you look at these changes, when you look at these forecasts that you're seeing, look for things like, are these changes that are going to, the things that are going to persist, are those changes that are going to be accelerating trends that we already saw underway? So, for example, automation. You know, automation was already sort of happening, and what's happening now with the coronavirus is ramping that up. Or the same with telecommuting. There's always telecommuting was always sort of the thing on the horizon, people working from home or working away from their office. And now what's happening with the virus has obviously supercharged that. So when you're looking at change, you can say, is this something that is accelerating a trend that you've already seen? Other things we talk about, like with our clients, and helping them understand this, are these, has this revealed something new? Like, are these trends that you're looking at, have they revealed something new or useful? So like curbside pickup for stores and restaurants is something new. And so that sort of shows that this is that could be a persistent or lasting change. And then there are a lot of changes that we're seeing now that have smashed through old barriers or ways of thinking. So you see things like movies now being released directly to video, and rather than going through a theater. And we saw last week, I don't know if you saw this, but Universal and AMC theaters are now in a spat because Universal released Trolls directly to video, to home streaming, and it made more money in its first week than the original Trolls movie made in the theater, in its first 4 months. And so, or you have now new rules around restaurants and alcohol that are sort of smashing through the old blue laws in regards to how you can serve it or how you can sell it. So again, when we talk to our clients about how do you make sense of what's going on, is this a change? Is the thing that you're seeing, the trend, the forecast you're seeing, is it something that reflects a smashing through old ways of thinking that looks sustainable? So
yeah, but I was going to ask.
I was just going to say, because there's a lot of going of what we call wish casting going on, which is not forecasting. A lot of people who have their own sort of horse in the race are saying, well, of course, this means that, this means the coronavirus is going to change it, and it's going to be completely beneficial for whatever hobby horse, whatever idea that I have. And you'll all see it. So we're trying to help our clients sort of get around that idea of wish casting and being able to really identify true change being brought about.
I guess what I wanted to ask you, because you kind of hit on the two of them right there. So take restaurants. Do we see that curve? Like the other day, I walked around DC picking up food and drinks at bars. Mm-hmm. Is that something we think? Do we see an acceleration of people going away from having waiters waiting on them, or do we see this is just another added part of restaurants?
I think that there's a short-term and a long-term answer. I think that the short-term answer, yes, that's what we're going to see. I mean, again, getting back to changes that were already underway, you have the rise of all those DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, who are already eating into the dine-in at restaurant experience, to the point where they were starting to build what are called dark kitchens, which are just massive sort of factory kitchens that they would make the recipe. You'd call in your order to the restaurant, and that would get relayed to the service kitchen that all these delivery services run out of, and they have all the recipes there, and it's just being made at these institutional kitchens and delivered to your house rather than coming from the restaurant itself. So you have that, and in the short term, it's going to be hard to get people back into any group situation. I know that you have sort of the diehards who are, live free or die, and I will go where I want to, and whose idea of freedom seems to be just shouting no rather than, you can't make me, rather than any sort of cohesive idea about freedom and liberty and living in a social contract. But it's going to be hard to get people into restaurants, and you're even seeing now in states where they're opening up, there's so much distancing between tables. You're not going to be able to get the coverage. You're not going to be able to get the turnover, the customer turnover you need to make your rent in these restaurants, because you're only doing half the business based on state regulations about being safe. And so I think that those restaurants who can shift to delivery and who can sort of orient themselves, and you're already seeing some of the restaurants being able to do that, even high-end restaurants, sort of retooling what their recipes are, what they're making. still being able to attach a premium to their offerings, to their food, because of the chefs and because of the reputation of the restaurant. So yeah, I think that in the short term you're going to see that. Now in the long term, 5 years down the road, if there's a viable vaccine that allows people to go out in groups and act safer, I think then in 5 years you'll start to see the resurgence of dine-in eating. But as I said before, this has already sort of accelerated a lot of the trends that we've seen in regards to restaurants and eating or taking out.
Yeah, and then there's two other ones I would hit on because me and my friends have sort of been talking about these things because there's nothing else to talk about.
Sure.
Other than everything. Movie theaters, for years we've seen streaming become a reality. We've seen movies like The Interview that debuted on a streaming service.
Right.
Could this be a short-term or a long-term decline of theaters?
Oh, I think we're going to see the long-term decline of theaters. And again, for a couple of reasons. One, I touched on, that Universal seemed to have had a tremendous amount of success releasing the new Trolls movie. And the thing there is that under the old model, the studio and the theaters used to split the revenues about 50-50. But by releasing straight to streaming, it's an 80-20 split in favor of the studios, which is why AMC, when this happened, got all up in arms and said, all right, well, if you're going to do this, we're not going to release any of your movies in the theater anymore, because you could tell that it's a direct hit to the lifeblood of movie theaters. So so now you have the success. You have a couple of examples where movie producers, art studios are being able to recoup the money that they spent on making the movie, and recouping in a way that it's not just a little bit, but they're actually making legit money on it. But again, it's getting people to go into theaters. I mean, theaters were already sort of, with the home theater system, you've got your own couch, you've got a good setup. You don't have to worry about someone behind you kicking or coughing on you or, being noisy. And it's going to be hard to get people to go into crowded spaces like that again, even if you do every other seat or every 2 seats. I saw something the other day that theater owners, someone had put out an idea that what they were going to do is, like, everybody who comes into the theater would have a fever check first. Like, they were going to be checking, they're going to be sort of doing rudimentary virus scans on everybody who comes into a movie theater or even a playhouse. And I just thought, why would I want to do that when I can see the same thing at home and not have someone, not have to worry about getting sick, because it's not that you walk into theater and you're like, oh, I feel bad. But as soon as someone starts testing, as soon as you're in a situation where people are being tested, all you think about now is, well, does someone here have it? Am I going to get it? And it's hard to sit and relax and watching Trolls or whatever when you're worried that even 2 seats away, that person may have the virus. And, whereas I could have watched this at home and not have to worry about the virus at all.
And then the other one, it kind of is just tangentially related, but for years before this year, I noticed, and I read it different places, a decline in like pro sporting events. More people were watching from home. Stadiums were bringing in, bigger screens, different amenities to try to get people to come back to the games. I know for years there was like a sellout for the Ravens at their stadium, at Bank, and then even when they were winning, they weren't selling out. Is this a long-term trend too, or is it a short-term trend where we don't know when we'll be back? But what do you think?
I don't know enough about that to really make an informed comment one way or the other. So, I mean, because I've seen those things too, but then those numbers bounce up and down every year because, for the last couple of years, there's been this, there's sort of been a low undercurrent of, oh, this is a real death knell for the NFL. Like, people aren't watching games, people aren't going to games. But then last year, they had their biggest year. They completely bounced back. They had one of their biggest years ever. And then everybody went, well, it's not actually the death knell of the NFL after all, So it's hard to tell with sporting events because there's so many factors, and I don't pay enough attention to that industry to be able to really say one way or the other. So.
And then the only thing I would ask is, looking at one of the things people keep saying is like, well, we'll have to get used to this, to staying 6 feet away from each other. Like you said, the masks, that's been a concern. Do you see, I don't know how much of forecasting you do into how society plays out, but, as a historical scholar looking at humans and looking at how they react to things, is it a long-term change, you think, for society in America, or is it a 5-year snap back to what we were?
I think the big thing that's going to determine how long this goes on and what sort of change it's going to make is uh, the how quickly, if all, there is a vaccine. Um, a vaccine. I mean, I sound like the president here, wishing for the magic bullet that cures everything. But a vaccine, even if it's 18 months away, if they say that we've got something, it's going to take a while to get everybody inoculated, but we're going to be able to inoculate everybody. I think that obviously, takes care of this problem. I've been really impressed with how much everybody seems to be, for the most part, adhering to the rules, which I did not expect when this first started. I thought there was going to be a lot. I thought there was going to be a lot more effort to get people to pay attention to social distancing and staying home and wearing masks, and some of that adherence to the rules has been systematic. I mean, it's my daughter's not going to school, so she's obviously has to stay at home, and they've closed down things. But I think that even when things open back up again, we're going to see, at least for probably a year or so, maybe two, people being very cautious. And again, it gets back to my point about people not wanting to be in large crowds. Like one of the things we've been looking at is, what does this mean for businesses downtown, particularly in big cities? Like, how are you going to, if you have an office on the 45th floor and you have 800 people who work in your office, how are you going to get 800 people up to your office in a way that they feel comfortable? Because you can only probably put 1 or 2 people in an elevator at most, given the social distancing rules. And you've got an office tower, you've got a 45-story office tower with tens of thousands of people who work in there. How do you get that done? How do you make that happen so that you don't spend 3 hours of your day waiting in line at the elevator, for an elevator ride that might freak you out? So I think that that's the sort of thing that's going to keep people from home and start and continue to shift to working from home or telecommuting, working from other places where you don't have to be in that close of contact with that many people.